Welcome to the world of drumming. My name's Cameron, and on this DVD I'm going to show you the basics of popular drumming so that by the end you should be able to play through an entire song. To begin with, we're going to look at how to set up a kit and selecting the right sticks for you. Then we're going to look at some basic drumming rudiments to build strength and endurance in your hands. And finally, we're going to get on the kit and look at the construction of a song and how to apply a beat. We've got a lot to get through, so let's get started. This is a drum. The two main parts of a drum are the shell and the head. When the head's struck with the stick, the vibrations in the shell cause the sound that you hear. The head is held onto the drum through these lugs and these rims, and they can be tightened or loosened to change the pitch. A cymbal has two main parts, the bell and the body, each creating different tones. Before we get started, let's have a look at a standard drum kit. A basic 5-piece drum kit is made up of the following components. The bass drum is the largest and deepest of all the drums on the kit and is played with your feet. That's why it's also called the kick drum. There are two types of toms on a standard drum kit, mounted toms and a floor tom. The mounted toms are normally mounted on the bass drum or on a rack. And the floor tom sits on the floor on legs. The snare drum is the most distinctive drum on the kit. Its special sound is produced by wires which run across the bottom head of the snare drum, and they give it its distinctive crack sound. There are three different types of cymbals on the kit: the hi-hats, the crash, and the ride. The hi-hat is two cymbals held together and attached to a footboard. The hi-hats create a tight chick sound, or if open, a whooshing sort of sound. Crash cymbals come in all different sizes and are used to make an expressive crash sound. Crash cymbals often signify a change in the music or an accent. The ride cymbal is the largest and heaviest of the cymbals on the drums and is often played with a constant riding pattern. Because of its size and weight, you can play a lot of strokes very close together on the ride cymbal and they don't wash together. Another important aspect of a drum kit, apart from the drums and cymbals, is the hardware. The hardware is what holds the whole drum kit together and enables you to play things like the bass drum and the hi-hat. The bass drum pedal is made up of a footboard, a mount and a beater. The footboard and the beater are held together by a spring, and when you depress the footboard, the beater hits the bass drum. The hi-hat stand also has a foot pedal at the base, which enables you to open the cymbals, playing them with a chick sound or playing whooshing open sound. Cymbal stands come in two different types: straight cymbal stands and boom stands. Boom cymbal stands allow you to play cymbals over the kit for easier access. Before we go on, let's talk a little bit about setting up the kit. When you set up your kit, everything should be within ease of reach. Your bass drum leg should come straight out of your body, and the top of your leg should be reasonably flat. The front of your knee should be in line with your ankle. Too close to the bass drum, you get sore shins. Too far away and you're reaching for the bass drum. All of your toms and your cymbals should be within easy reach so that you can hit them with both the tip of your stick and the shoulder. Remember, your kit looking great from the front is nice, but if you can't hit everything on it, it's pretty useless. Here's a drumstick. Drumsticks are made up of the tip, the shoulder, the shaft, and the butt. Make sure when you pick a drumstick for yourself that you pick one that is the right size for your hands and the style of music that you're going to play. Heavier drumsticks are better for louder, heavier types of music, and lighter drumsticks for quieter music, like jazz. When you're selecting your sticks at the store, roll them along a countertop or a practice pad. If the stick is bent, the tip will move up and down. A straight stick will remain level. Avoid sticks that have any discoloration in the wood, as that generally represents a weakness and they could break. The next thing you need is a practice pad. Practice pads are normally made of rubber or a synthetic skin and are a great way to practice without bothering anyone. Finally, a metronome creates a steady pulse, which teaches you good time and gives you something to practice along with. Just like choosing the right drumsticks, choosing the right kit depends on the sort of music you're going to play. Drum kits can be really expensive, but if you look after them, they can last you for a very long time. When you're selecting a drum kit, look at the stands and the hardware and make sure that they're sturdy and strong. But most importantly, play it. Sit at the kit and hit each drum hard and soft so you can hear the difference in sound at different volumes. A good kit should sound great at all volume levels. Once you've selected your kit, ask the salesperson to tune it up for you. Learning to tune drums can be a difficult process, and you want to get started with your kit sounding as good as it possibly can. There are hundreds of different types of cymbals available for drum kit. I've already introduced the basic 3 cymbals, hi-hat, crash and ride, and there are plenty of reasonably priced hi-hat, ride and crash packs available. When you buy your cymbals, make sure again that you get decent ones. Cheap cymbals will crack or bend easily. It's also worth remembering that a lot of the great drummers developed their sound based around their cymbals, so pick a cymbal that you enjoy listening to as well as enjoy playing. Now let's talk about holding the sticks. Before we get onto the grip, let's find the best balance point for your drumstick. To find the balance point, grip underneath the stick and let it bounce on the practice pad. We're aiming for a good amount of bounces. Too far up the stick and there won't be very many. Too far down and the stick will die on the pad. Once you've found the best balance point, it's time to talk about the fulcrum of the grip. The most important part of your grip exists at the fulcrum point, which is between the flat of your thumb and the first joint of your index finger. Once you've found the fulcrum, which is where the stick pivots from, let the stick rest against the base of your palm and wrap your fingers around. Then, put your stick on the practice pad so the top of your hand faces the roof. It's exactly the same rule for the other hand, and when they're combined, they should create an arrow shape. Let's talk a little bit about how to hit the drums and how to hit the cymbals. When you hit the drums, it's important to be consistent and accurate, and always try to aim for the same spot. Hitting the middle of the drum will give you a nice open tone. The closer you get to the edge, and the pitch will change. Consistency is very important when you're playing the drums, so try to always aim for the same position. When you're playing the cymbals, you can get a different tone from the tip of the stick and the shoulder of the stick. These can be used to your advantage, so make sure you're aware of how you can get different tones out of your cymbals. Also very importantly, when you're hitting the cymbals, don't drive the stick directly into the cymbal, but glance off to the side. That way your cymbals will last longer and they won't bend or break. Now we're going to look at the rudiments. Rudiments are the building blocks for everything you play on the drums, and we're going to look at the basic 3 rudiments: single stroke, double stroke and paradiddle. When you practice your rudiments, remain consistent. Use a metronome if you can, but always try to keep the same tempo and the same volume. It's just good practice. And also, try to start with alternating hands. If you start one exercise with your right hand, the next time you practice it, start it with your left. The first rudiment we're going to look at is the single stroke. It's called the single stroke because of a single stroke on each hand, right, left, right, left. When you're practicing the single stroke, watch your strokes carefully and listen to the sound they produce. It should be even and consistent. Aim to play the single stroke for 30 seconds without stopping. The sound should be clear, consistent and even. The next stroke's the double stroke. It's called a double stroke because it's 2 strokes with each hand. Same as the single stroke, keep all of your sticking as clear as possible. And again, practice this for 30 seconds before you try a faster tempo. The final of the basic rudiments is a paradiddle. A paradiddle is a combination of single and double strokes with a twist. The twist is the accent. In music, an accent is where you play one note louder than the other notes around it, and in the paradiddle, the accent comes on the first note of each paradiddle. The paradiddle sticking pattern is right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, left, left. And the accent comes on the first note of each paradiddle. Right, left, left, right, left. The trick to an accent is to play that stick higher than the other sticks, which will make it louder. Right, left, left. If you listen closely, you can hear where the paradiddle got its name. Paradiddle, paradiddle, paradiddle. Now you can try playing some rudiments around the kit. Here are a few different exercises to use your single stroke, double stroke, and paradiddle. We've worked on your hand technique, but let's not forget your feet. There are two different ways to play the bass drum pedal: heel up and heel down. There's no correct way, it just depends on what style of music you're playing and your personal preference. For heel down playing, you rest your heel on the ground and pivot from your ankle, pressing the footboard firmly into the head. When playing with your heel up, rest the ball of your foot on the footboard, and then it's a jumping motion, allowing the weight of your leg to push down on the pedal. This is a heavier style of playing and involves letting the weight of your leg push the bass drum pedal into the head. The foot technique you use to play the bass drum is exactly the same as the technique you'd use to play the hi-hat. For most of the exercises on this DVD, we'll be playing with the hi-hat closed, so just let the weight of your leg rest on the hi-hat pedal. Later on in the DVD, we'll be doing some more advanced exercises that will involve the opening and closing of your other foot. Now we're going to talk about reading music. For the purpose of this DVD, I'm not going to get into a lot of theory, but I really do encourage you to continue reading music as you progress in your drumming career. We're going to look at 5 different parts of musical reading: the music staff, notes, rests, a bar line, and time signatures. The staff is made up of 5 lines, and depending on where the notes are placed, shows us what drum or cymbal to play. Now let's have a look at notes and rests. Notes are made up of a head, a stem, and a tail. There are many different types of notes, but we're going to concentrate on 3 of them: the quarter note, the 8th note, and the 16th note. You can recognise one type of note from another by its tail. Quarter notes have no tail, 8th notes have 1 tail, and 16th notes have 2. The type of note indicates the note's size, or how long or short it is, or in our case, how you count it. Quarter notes are longer than 8th notes and eighth notes are longer than 16th notes. In fact, if you use a little maths, it's pretty easy to work out that a quarter note is twice as large as an eighth note and 4 times the size of a 16th note. Rests are the opposite of notes, and as the name suggests, tell you when to rest or not to play. Rests are really important in music because the space between the notes is often as important as the notes themselves. For every note, there is an equivalent rest which takes up the same space in the bar. Here is a quarter note rest, an eighth note rest, and a 16th note rest. There's a fair bit of information there, and this is really important, so let's sum up what we've covered so far. A staff is where the notes are placed and indicates which drum or cymbal you're playing. Notes tell you when to play. Notes come in different sizes, which are indicated by how many tails they have. Rests tell you when not to play. Each note has a corresponding rest of the same size. We are covering quarter notes, eighth notes, and 16th notes. Music on the staff is broken up into bars, which are also called measures. Each bar is of a certain size. That size indicates how many notes of a particular size will fit in the bar. The size of the bar is dictated by the time signature. The time signature is shown at the beginning of the music. Most popular music is played in what we call 4/4 time. Each of these two numbers has a specific purpose. The top number indicates how many beats there are in a bar. Ever heard someone counting in a song? 1, 2, 3, 4. They're counting in the beat in 4/4 time. If it was 5/4 time, they would count in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The bottom number in a time signature tells us what note makes up the beat. Imagine the time signature is a fraction in maths and added a 1 above it instead of the 4 that was there. Now it reads 1/4, so the sort of note that makes up the 4 beats in the bar is a quarter note. If the time signature was 4/8, it would mean that the beat was on the 8th note, and there would be 4 eighth notes in the bar. And if it was 4/16, the beat is on 16th notes, and there would be 4 16th notes in the bar. We can now determine the size of the bar. In a bar of 4/4, you can fit 4 quarter notes, or the equivalent of 4 quarter notes, such as 8 eighth notes or 16 16th notes. To sum up, music is broken up into sections called bars. The size of the bar, which dictates how many notes will fit in it, is determined by the time signature. 4/4 time is the most common time in popular music. The first number of a time signature says how many beats in the bar. The second number indicates which type of note the beat is on, and therefore how big the bar is. In 4/4 time, we can only fit 4 quarter notes, or the equivalent amount of other kinds of notes, in a bar. If you're confused about any of this, don't worry. You can come back to this section later, and the next part where we talk about how to count notes will probably make things a little bit clearer. Now that we've covered the basics of music reading, we're going to talk a little bit about counting. For each type of note that you play, quarter note, eighth note and 16th note, there's a different way of counting which makes reading a lot easier. Throughout these exercises you're going to have to count aloud, and sometimes that can feel a little bit silly. But trust me, it makes things a lot easier in the long run. As we learnt before, in 4/4 time there are 4 quarter notes in the bar. We count quarter notes 1, 2, 3, 4. Try playing single stroke, counting out loud, playing quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now try applying this counting to your other rudiments. Double stroke, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And paradiddle, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Applying the same counting rules to other types of notes is easy. As we mentioned before, in a bar of 4/4, there are 8 eighth notes. We count eighth notes like this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. As you can see, you still have the quarter notes in there on 1, 2, 3 and 4, still the same distance apart, but now there are also the and notes in between, making up 8 notes in the bar. Try counting a bar of quarter notes, then a bar of eighth notes. Remember that the time between 1, 2, 3 and 4 should be exactly the same across both bars, but in the second eighth note bar you will count "and" between each of the numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Try playing eighth notes to each of your rudiments. Single stroke, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Double stroke, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and paradiddle, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Finally, let's look at how to count 16th notes. In a bar of 4/4, there are 16 16th notes. You count 16th notes like this. 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 4 E and A. You can see the quarter notes are still there on 1, 2, 3 and 4, and eighth notes on 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. But in between there are the E and the A sounds, making up 16 notes. Now try playing all of your rudiments counting 16th notes. The paradiddle is particularly suited to counting 16th notes, as the accent will land on 1, 2, 3 and 4. 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 4 E and A. To show how all these notes fit together, I'm now going to play a bar of quarter notes, a bar of eighth notes and a bar of 16th notes. Listen carefully and count along. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 4 E and A, 1. Now you have the basics of music reading. I really do encourage you to continue learning to read music as you progress with your drumming. It's a very important aspect of being a musician and will really help you along the way. Now that we've covered hand and foot technique and how to read music, we're going to get stuck into playing a rock beat. The rock beat is made up of 3 parts: the hi-hat, the snare and the bass drum. We're going to start learning each part individually and then we'll combine them to make a full rock beat. But before we get started, just a quick note on counting. Make sure you count aloud while you're playing these exercises. It'll focus your brain and it'll get you through them a lot quicker. First, let's look at the hi-hat pattern. The hi-hat's the glue that holds the beat together and is a constant stream of eighth notes and looks like this. We count the hi-hat pattern 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The second element of the rock beat is the snare drum. The snare is the voice of the beat and falls on 2 and 4 and sounds like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Final element of the rock beat is the bass drum. The bass drum is the anchor to the beat and counterpoint to the snare. In this exercise, we're going to play the bass drum on 1 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now let's start combining some of the elements of the rock beat. First we're going to listen to the snare and the bass drum together. The snare and the bass drum make up the melody of the rock beat, and so it'll give you a pretty good idea about how the beat's going to sound when it's finished. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Remember to count aloud. Now we're going to combine the hi-hat and the snare parts. Remember, the hi-hat is playing constant eighth notes and the snare will join the hi-hat on 2 and on 4, like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now we're going to combine the hi-hat and the bass drum on 1 and on 3, and hi-hat again on constant eighth notes. Let's try it. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now we're going to combine all three elements together to create your first basic rock beat. Remember to count aloud and don't get discouraged if you don't make it all the way through the first time. Try playing just part of the bar, say 1 and 2 and then extend it a little bit further each time until you can get through a whole bar without making a mistake. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. It's really important that you get as comfortable as possible when playing the beat, because this is what you're going to be doing the majority of the time. Play your beats at different speeds and at different volume levels so you feel completely comfortable getting into the groove. The better you get at playing the beat, the more comfortable it will feel and the better it will sound. Now that you've learned a basic rock beat, we're going to change the composition slightly. In each of the following exercises, we're going to play different patterns on the bass drum while maintaining the hi-hat and the snare at the same pace. Each exercise I'll play slowly and then faster. Remember to count while you're playing and don't rush ahead. Wait until you feel comfortable with the beat before you move to the next exercise. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One 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 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One 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 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One 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 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now we're going to try some offbeat variations on the bass drum. In 4/4 time, as we mentioned before, the beat is on the quarter note, 1, 2, 3 and 4. The beats we're going to try now focus the bass drum on the and of the 8th note pattern. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One 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 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, with the same pattern still remaining on the hi-hat, we're going to have variations both on the bass drum and on the snare. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One 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 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One 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 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now that you've mastered the basic rock beat, we're going to talk about a couple of new variations. The first variation is moving the hi-hat pattern from the hi-hat to the ride cymbal. Here's an example. Now we're going to move the hi-hat pattern to the floor tom. This makes for a much more dramatic beat. Here's an example. Now you can try applying each one of those variations on the ride and on the floor toms to all of the beats you've learnt so far. Another variation I'd like to talk about involves the snare drum, and this is called chock on the snare. To create a chock sound on the snare, place the butt of the stick on the edge of the skin and allow the stick to hit the rim on the other side. This sound's commonly used in quiet songs or in parts of the verse. Here's an example. The first element is the intro. As the name suggests, the intro generally sets the mood or some key element of the song. Intros vary between either soft and placid or loud and energetic depending on the type of song. This one's fairly soft. The next part in the song structure is the verse. The verse is where all the action takes place. Most songs have a number of verses. From one verse to another, the vocal melody stays basically the same, but the lyrics change. As this is where the story of the song is told, it's important that listeners can clearly hear what is being sung, so the drums tend to be quieter and consistent in this section of the song. The chorus is the repetitive part of the song. The lyrics to the chorus are always the same. They contain the primary melody of the song, and this is where the main driving point is. It's also most often where the name of the song comes from. In the chorus, all of the instruments generally play louder and more openly. In this chorus section, I'm playing the ride cymbal, which has a more open sound. The final element to the song is the bridge. The bridges will sound different to many other sections of the song. The bridge is often where you find either the twist in the story or a solo. In this section, I've changed from playing the body of the ride cymbal to the bell to accentuate the loudness of this part of the song. Bridges tend to be more open and complex and are generally loud and energetic. Now we're going to talk a little bit about drum fills. Drum fills are used to express changes in the song, for instance, from the verse to the chorus. The most simple sort of drum fill is a crash cymbal on 1. Here's an example. Fills can be short or long, have many notes or none. Be creative, it's up to you. Here are some more examples of some fills you can try. When you're playing a fill, it's a good idea to work out where you're going and how you're going to get back to where you started. The combination of stickings that you use, right or left-handed, often needs to be taken into account to ensure that you can hit the crash or get back to the hi-hats. Here are some examples. Now we're going to introduce a new rudiment to your vocabulary, the flam. A flam is particularly suited to playing fills and involves two notes played very closely together. The first note, called the grace note, starts very close to the head, and the second note, the primary note, starts much higher. And they sound like this. The two strokes together create a sound much like the name, flam, flam. Try it now. Each time you try a flam, aim to start with the alternating hand so you get good at both. Now here are some exercises around the kit that involve flams. Here are some more advanced exercises that can be applied to the hi-hat of the rock beat. The first of which is called the washy hi-hat. Washing the hi-hat involves opening the hi-hat slightly so you create a wash sound between the two cymbals. This is used a lot in heavier rock music. Here's an example. Try applying this wash technique to some of the rock beats you've learnt already. Now here's a series of 4 different open hi-hat exercises. Each one of these can be applied to all the rock beats you've learnt so far. On the music, where you see the loop joining 2 notes, is where the hi-hat should be open and then closed again. Here are some examples. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now we're going to try some more rock beat variations involving the hi-hat, this time involving 16th notes. Do you remember how to count 16th notes? 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 4 E and A. The first exercise is going to involve playing 16th notes on the hi-hat with one hand. Here's an example. 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 4 E and A. Now we're going to try playing the same 16th note pattern, but this time with both hands playing the hi-hat. Here it goes. 1 E and A, 2 E and A, 3 E and A, 4 E and A. As you can see, each of these patterns have a different sound, so they're both worth learning. Try applying these different hi-hat patterns to all of the rock beats you've learned so far. That brings us to the end of the DVD. Remember to watch your technique, count aloud, and practice your rudiments. But more importantly, get out there and see and listen to as many drummers as you possibly can. That's the best way to learn. Thanks for joining me on this drumming journey.